Mets family? Welcome to Lito The Mets Guy, where we are going to talk about the nitty gritty of the New York Mets. I want to talk more baseball operations, more analytics. As much as I love hustle, as much as I love talking about players, I think it's super important to talk about the other side of the ball, pun intended. So to start us off, I actually want to talk about qualifying offers, right? So for today's lineup, we actually have the three-tier system. We have the impact on the New York Mets and a quick case study so we could better understand how it truly impacts the team. So what's a qualifying offer? So a qualifying offer is essentially like a tag that a team places on a player that's about to become a free agent. And the player is now in the process of having to think about, I just got an offer for a whopping $25 million, right? Can go both ways. So on the rarer side, the player accepts the qualifying offer and says, you know what, I actually do need to get my stats up because I would like to get a better deal and I don't feel like I can get better than 22 or even let's say 17. I might be looking at 15. Is that what I really want? Is that what I'm really worth? Right? Some will say yes and go along with it and go back with the team. Then others will reject it. Now, if the player rejects the offer, what happens next is the team that they sign with now has to compensate their former team with draft compensation. What most people don't know is that the draft compensation and the penalties are not created equal based on the tier system, which I'm going to get to now. So tier one, the luxury taxpayers. Those are the teams that exceeded this competitive balance tax, or the CBT, as you'll see it often, which is the threshold set by the MLB based on how much you spend. They face the harshest penalties. So we're talking about the Mets, the Yankees, the Dodgers. It's only a handful of teams, not many, that are in that tier. Then we have tier two, which is the revenue sharing teams. Those are the teams that receive revenue sharing payouts. And they usually face the softest penalties. And guess what else? They get the best compensation. And we're talking about the teams that have the owners that we often complain about. So we're talking about the D-backs, the Pirates, and the Tampa Bay Rays, and a few more. Tier three, that's the middle ground team. They call it middle class, based on how they spend, right? So those are the teams that neither pay the tax nor receive revenue sharing. And they're like in the middle ground of things that spend just enough and are always find themselves to be competitive. And that's the Braves, the Cardinals, and the Giants and Brewer types. So I want us to talk about really quickly what the penalties are, because I often hear Mets fans saying, just pay the player, it doesn't matter, Steve Cohen has the money. But it's deeper than just the tax itself, right? And like the threshold, it's how much more they're actually sacrificing. So the reason why I say not all qualifying offers are created equal is because tier one teams like the Mets, not only do they have to pay those taxes based on the value of the contract after the fact, right? They also have to forfeit their second and fifth highest picks, right? So those are usually the picks that are in the first round, depending on like where the team falls. But let's put that into perspective. We're talking about Carson Bench. We're talking about Jet Williams, right? Those are two of the most coveted prospects that we're talking about possibly taking over center field and second base. Are we really willing to sacrifice that? Then on top of that, we have $1 million in pool money that has to be sacrificed. International pool money, sorry. And we're talking about like the difference between signing a top 10 player in the international pool, right? Like Elias Pena, where the kid is just a stud with a beautiful lefty swing. But what if those $1 million was where we would have fallen short? Or that's where if we could have gotten him, but we still fell short on another player in the draft class, right? So like those are the things that we need to start thinking about when we say, oh, let's just spend money on the player, right? And a qualifying offer doesn't matter. It truly does. Because then when we think about the tier two teams, they only have to give up the third highest pick and they don't sacrifice any international pool money, right? So these are teams that no matter what, for the most part, when you really look at it, they're already stacked in the minors. So they might not care too much about having to make that signing, but for the most part, they don't make that signing regardless because they're not spending much of the money that they're making in revenue anyway. And then lastly, we have the tier 3 that they have to give up their second highest pick and sacrifice $500,000. Again, these are also teams who work on being competitive, but as you've seen from the teams that I've named, they'd rather call their guys up and have long-term extensions. So you don't often see them having to sign many players like the higher competitive teams do. Now let's talk about what's the reward for the tiers. So for tier 1, they get to pick, so tier 1 gets to pick after the 4th round. That's not the end of the world because, like, I could think about the Mets have Zach Thornton out in Bing, who is a lefty pitcher who has had great success, has had great numbers in 2025. So it's like you can find your diamond in the rough, but it's not something that you're going to find every single year, right? Then you have your tier 2, they get to pick after the 1st round. But I will say this comes with an asterisk because that usually is determined by the player's contract. So that's more determined if the player signs a contract worth $50 million or more. And then lastly, tier 3, they get to pick after the competitive balance round, which is usually around the 75th pick in the draft, right? So let's continue to keep that in mind. Like, I'm giving up this much, and I'm also not getting much in return if I put a QO on a player, like let's say Edwin Diaz, right? And we put that on him is because we're trying to keep him. But if he leaves, we can at least get something. But it's still not ideal. Now, let's do a quick case study, right? And I'm thinking about a player because the Mets need pitching. There's no way to sugarcoat that. So I quickly chose Zach Gallen. So we're talking about a 30-year-old innings eater, right? Dude just always throws 180, 190, always past like 175. And the Mets have had not so great history of players once they hit that 160 plateau. David Peterson showed us that this past season. Then on top of that, Zach Gallen is also a New Jersey native, closer to home. He is only, I'm going to try and play it off and say he's only a few years removed from his All-Star season. It was in 2023. But overall, it makes you wonder, like, the Mets need a guy who can go over that innings hump and give them consistency in terms of innings. And as the season goes on, who's going to be that reliable arm who's always going to give you 5, well, not even at this point, at least give you 6, 7 innings when it's much needed, because that's something that the team needed this past season, as we saw, right? And thinking about that, where does Zach Gallen fall within the need-based thing? Is he going to be the biggest signing? I don't think so, or he wouldn't be. But we also have to start thinking about return on investment, right? So Zach Gallen, like I said, innings eater, he's 30. So with the qualifying offer attached to him from the Diamondbacks, we might see a world where he's going to go for 3 years, $75 million, because, you know, the market is always inflated, especially when there are not many more great pitchers on the market. I would say there are less than 8 pitchers that are better than him at the moment, from when I last remember. So he's going to be able to get a nice deal somewhere. So let's put those numbers into perspective. Let's say he gets 3 years, $75 million from the New York Mets, right? Not only do the Mets have to worry about that $25 million a year that they have to give him in terms of salary, let's start thinking about the fact that he might want incentives, right? I'm not saying that's the thing, but that's what players often want. Hey, if I get back into all-star form, give me an extra 500, right? Then we have, like, perfect example, Soto's making 60 a year on paper, and he just got an extra 150K because he got a silver slugger. So those little implications are always there. So not only do they have to give him the $25 million a year, they have to think about what else they gave that year. So the Mets are also going to have to give up their 2nd and 5th highest draft pick. And then they're also going to have to sacrifice that $1 million in draft pool money. So when they look at Zach Gallen, they're going to have to question, who am I getting? Do I only want innings? Do I want him to turn back into his all-star form? Do I want all the above, right? Because now I'm sacrificing so much, and I'm thinking about the future of this team, that we have to start thinking about players that are going to be of immediate impact, because currently the Mets have had some, I would say, bad luck or bad fortune in terms of player performance. So before we start screaming out just sign the player, sign the player, sign the player. We have to think about return on investment, guys. So it's going to be super important as we continue this dialogue that we put not only our fake GM hats on, but also a deeper baseball mind hat, whatever you want to call it, on. I'm gonna have to work on that phrase because as everything continues, you always have to think about what is the return on investment. So I hope you enjoyed our first episode. It was nice, short, sweet, and I promise that the content is only going to get better. And I'll also love feedback and comments. I would like for you to like, share, subscribe if you like what you saw, and I'll continue to come back with more. And as a family, we'll continue talking about some dope stuff. Peace.